Yes, we're still staying with the conifers and with the pines. We have not switched over to taping the horticulture video. This is just a pine that has a intermediate stage of its life called the grass stage. This one is just 1 year old, still in the grass stage, and this is 2 years old. I'm going to open it up in the canopy so you can kind of see its bud, where it's coming out from. If you look at the needle length, you should be able to guess. This is going to be longleaf pine. Now, my friends in the scientific community call this Pinus palustris. I really didn't know what the word palustris meant, so I looked it up in the dictionary and didn't make any sense. Palustris means swamp and or marsh area. I guess when these trees were first identified, they were so prolific about the state of Georgia that many times they were found everywhere, all the way from the sand hills, all the way into some of our natural bottom drains of evergreens and other conifers. Okay, as the longleaf pine gets a little older, it starts growing pretty rapidly. Let's go look at some of the other ones of it. Pull the camera up. You can look at some of the just this year's growth of the tree. The bud itself started here and it rose all the way, and that's how much it has grown so far this year. These young trees are about, my estimate, they're about 4 years old, and you can see how much growth is already on them. So let's go ahead and pull us a limb, and we'll go ahead and look and see what we got. Oh man, look at some big cones already on this tree. All right, pull this limb off. Let's go ahead and look at it. Okay, so longleaf pine, Pinus palustris. It is said to have 3 needles per fascicle. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yes, they are from 10 to 18 inches in length. All right, let's see how long they are. I'm going to use my measuring tape here. Okay, these are falling right there in about the 13.5 inch category. Now, I have seen Meek's Farm, they have a display with some needles from some longleafs that have about 24 inches in length, and that's pretty huge. That's pretty long. Now, if you look at the length of these needles, you can see they're actually going to be pretty long. Okay, 3 needles per fascicle, and you can also look at the length of fascicle is going to be fairly long. And we got our 3 needles. And from my understanding, folks in the horticulture and or pine straw business, they really like longleaf pine straw because it doesn't break down much in landscapes. Now, if these needles were a lot shorter, you would say they're pretty stiff. But with being about 13.5, 14, 16 inches long, they're really not that stiff just because of the extra added length. But man, you're talking about something that's heavy. And I know that some of the old timers, what they'll actually do is they'll take these needles, they'll soften them up, and they'll actually weave baskets with them. But I'm not going to do that today. Okay, let's look at some of the cones that we have right here on this branch. Man, what a cone. That's pretty good. I also got some other cones in this young tree. Nope, I didn't. This tree didn't have them. I just went ahead and put them up there just to show y'all this is a size cone. If you look at the cone, you can look and you can tell it does have a peg, so it is not sessiled. Many times this peg will stay on the tree, and on the actual branch itself will always have a few scales left on the branch, and that's the way the base of the cones look. It is going to be the biggest cone of any of the pines we have here in Georgia. With that being said, if you look at the amount of resin this tree also produces on its limbs, and sometimes it'll just naturally run a little bit of pitch. Okay? If you look at the bark on this tree, even this young tree, you can look and see how scaly it already is. The scaliness of the bark is going to be a key characteristic, and the slash pine and longleaf pine are the two pines that are going to have the scaliest bark. They have a little bit denser bark as well, and that helps in fire protection. These trees love fire. These trees were born of fire, and they actually need a lot of fire to regenerate. We're one of the most prevalent pines in the state of Georgia, and they kind of do grow rather slow, and that's one reason they're not replaced in a rotation. With that slow growth also comes a little bit of extra added strength. Out of the southern yellow pines, this one is said to be one of the strongest because it has more concentric growth rings per square inch. Furthermore, it's going to be one of the ones that were tapped for naval stores because this is a pine tree that does have a lot of gum, and it's one of the ones that is very it can tolerate beetle and bark beetle infestations better than other trees because it does produce more gum resin to help push out those beetles such as the black turpentine, Ips engraver, and southern pine beetle. With that being said, the slow growth keeps it from being replanted by a bunch of forest landowners who use a shorter rotation pine, and now longleaf pine ecosystems are predominantly have become less and less over time. Some of the remaining original longleaf pine ecosystems here that we have in the state are going to be kind of like in the red clay hill areas of North Florida, going up into Thomasville area, and some of the bigger plantations like Itchaway, Notchaway, where they still have some native stands of longleaf. Like we said, this is your longleaf pine, Pinus palustris. Needles are three per fascicle. Okay, we're one of the biggest cones that we have here in the state of Georgia. Very good tree for pine straw production. Very good tree for pole, pulp, paper, and lumber. Has one of the best form classes of pine for a pine tree. It doesn't really have much taper to it. This is one of the ones that does very good as far as creating an ecosystem for some other animals such as the red cock-headed woodpecker, and also your reptiles such as a black indigo snake and the gopher tortoise. Pinus palustris, longleaf pine, one of our native pines here in Georgia, and it's one of my favorite pines.